Is everybody signed on? This is the 2-minute warning. Good afternoon, everyone. I hereby call this remote meeting of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Ms. Silbaugh, do we have a quorum today?
Good afternoon. Yes, Chair, we have a quorum. Participating in the meeting today are yourself as Chair, Vice Chair Rush, Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, Commissioner Bob, Commissioner Al-Khatib, and Commissioner Lobby.
Thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. I propose an adjustment to the agenda today, and the adjustment is to take up the items that require votes, namely the safety event investigations and resolutions, immediately following the CEO's remarks. This is to ensure that we have the benefit of any input on those items from all commissioners that are present now. Audits, caps, and safety certification oversight updates would follow. Hearing no concern about the schedule change, the revised agenda is hereby adopted. We will start today with our safety message from Emergency Management Specialist Richard David. Mr. David.
Thank you, Chair Hart. It may still feel like summer, but August is back to school month. Be particularly mindful of your surroundings, whether you're walking, riding, taking the bus, taking the train, or driving. Be sure to follow school speed zone limits and don't be distracted by cell phones or other devices. Excuse me. Be aware of school buses, especially when the yellow caution lights or red stop lights are flashing for kids or kids at heart. Remember, do not overload backpacks or briefcases. The National Safety Council recommends backpacks weigh no more than 5 to 10% of a child's body weight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. We will now move on to the minutes from our previous meeting. Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes of the June 13, 2023 meeting were posted for review. In addition, I would like to report on the closed session held on June 13, 2023 that continued on June 29, 2023. The commissioners confirmed that they discussed only internal WMSC personnel matters in accordance with the requirements of the United States Code Title V, Section 552B, subsection C2, during those closed sessions. Are there any additional corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I move approval of the June 13th minutes as circulated. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Bob has seconded the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
The vote is 6 yay, 0 nay. The motion to approve the minutes as presented passes.
Thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. Next item on the agenda is that at every meeting, we provide an opportunity for public comments. And as mentioned at our last meeting, to ensure that we recognize all who wish to speak, we provided an opportunity for those who have joined the Zoom meeting to sign up in the chat box. If you wish to speak but did not sign in, please do so now. I would also remind everybody, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any concerns, any safety concerns through our website, WMSC.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. Ms. Minor, do we have anyone who's indicated that they would like to speak today?
Yes, Chair Hart, we have one speaker. Our speaker is Will Jackson. Mr. Jackson, you have 2 minutes and you're unmuted.
Sorry, just set my phone here. Good afternoon, Chair Hart, Dr. Meyer, and the Commission. On June 22nd, I visited the New Hampshire Avenue Bridge at the Fort Totten Plaque and Legacy Memorial Park for my second time. As we advance in transportation safety, we always need new tools to fix old problems. One of a classic tool, though, is education. I truly believe if we seek to educate everyone involved about the why and what of SMS, or safety management systems to define the acronym, and systems thinking, some of these stubborn safety failure cycles could truly be broken. Otherwise, it can come off to the uninformed eye as adversarial. I sometimes hang out at a Richmond airport to watch loved ones get reunited, and not in a creepy way, but because it is one of the most impactful things for me there is to watch. That is why we do this, and it is to keep people safe and because it helps people. In our interfaith chapel at RIC, where I find myself reflecting, there is a yin yang, and so I, of course, always think of Chair Hart and his pen in a lot of respects. Nodding to my former background, Dr. Meyer's past city and aviation experience, Chair Hart's vast aviation career, and circling back to Fort Totten, we will keep defying gravity on transportation safety, transportation advocacy, and people advocacy in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson, and thank you, Ms. Minor. We will now continue on with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities and the actions that we take on a daily basis to ensure that Metro Rail upholds its safety commitments and strives to continuously improve the safety of its system. This includes work on our own continuous improvement, which is reflected in the annual update to our program standard that we will consider later in this meeting, and the changes reflect improvements that we have identified over the past year and improvement from Metro and input from Metro Rail. We will also consider safety event investigations, hear updates on audits and corrective action plan oversight, and discuss our active work overseeing Metro Rail's safety certification process. I want to thank the WMSC staff for their oversight work on behalf of the region across Metro Rail's subject areas. I would also like to congratulate Commissioner Laube on his recent appointment by the Commonwealth of Virginia as a commissioner. We appreciate your collaboration and your expertise, and you have provided serving in the role as alternate, and we look forward to your continued positive impact for the WMSC and the WMSC's oversight on Metro Rail. Dr. Meyer, do you have any opening remarks?
Yes, sir, I do. I'll start with our oversight of Metro Rail's safety certification. Following our communications over the past year and additional communications and conversations over the last several months, Metro Rail is now making adjustments to its work related to automatic train operation and automatic door operation. Based on our review of documents, observation of Metro Rail's field activities, and ongoing interactions with Metro Rail personnel, we communicated to Metrorail that its work had not been on a path to meet its own safety certification requirements and therefore not on a path to receive the WMSC's concurrence. Metrorail has since begun to adjust its plans and developed appropriate foundational documents that are needed to inform and shape future testing and validation. In addition to regular ongoing interactions, Metrorail has scheduled a workshop on this topic next month, and we look forward to attending. We will continue our technical work and our communications with those at all levels of the Metrorail organization, and Mr. Sahu and Mr. Smith will provide more details later in this meeting. Moving on to the 7000 series rail cars, we continue to oversee Metrorail's implementation of that series return to service and any revisions that Metrorail may make to its return to service plan. We remain a party to the NTSB's accident investigation. Since the last public meeting, there have been 5 more wheel sets detected with measurement exceedances. In each case, these were detected by Metrorail's inspections, which were now being carried out every 30 days. Metrorail removed those wheels from service. 3 of the exceedances are of Metrorail's back-to-back measurement requirements. The first involved a gearbox side wheel on car 7219 that was found to have moved outward. The inspection also showed a gap between the journal bearing and the wheel that exceeded Metrorail's requirements. Our team observed investigative activities last month, including a truck inspection, tramming to assess the truck alignment, and wheel set demounting. Metrorail identified another back-to-back measurement exceedance on August 2nd. In that case, Metrorail detected evidence of wheel migration on car 7016 compared to the initial baseline measurement. On August 3rd, Metrorail detected the third back-to-back measurement exceedance, and that was on car 7226. The 2 other exceedances since your last meeting are of journal bearing gap requirements, and they happened last month. This can appear when a wheel or a bearing moves on the axle. We are continuing to engage with Metrorail on these measurement exceedances and the investigations into each exceedance, including as the information relates to the NTSB derailment investigation. In the meantime, Metrorail is progressing its plans to address one of the issues identified in the investigation, wheel set assembly requirements in the 7000 series design that were not aligned with industry practices for cars of similar size and weight. On June 26th, we informed Metrorail that we had no technical objection to its wheel set replacement program and that Metrorail had submitted to which Metrorail had submitted its latest revision. The WMSC observed some of Metrorail's training last week on this program. The training that we observed was positive. This will lead to Metrorail's work to assemble wheel sets with tighter interference fits and higher press tonnages to align with industry norms for rail cars of similar design and weight. Metrorail's plans includes procedures, quality assurance steps, and the safety certification of its processes and wheel set assemblies. This includes an engineering test plan Metrorail designed to assess any unintended consequences of these changes. Our team continues to monitor other steps Metrorail is taking to address issues identified by the derailment investigation, and this includes monitoring Metrorail's work to study its restraining rails and to study its frogs and interlockings. To provide an update on other areas of ongoing work, we continue to monitor Metrorail's roadway worker protection program and changes that Metrorail is developing. Metrorail recently paused these changes to its current program at least until 2024 due to issues with the new procedures as they stood and related confusion in the training process. It's critical that Metrorail follow its change management processes to ensure that hazards are appropriately identified and mitigated in the development and consideration of any potential changes. We look forward to Metrorail making updates to the draft RWP program to address known hazard and mitigate known hazards. We will continue to interact with Metrorail and provide examples of gaps in the procedures and training that need to be addressed. After WMSC follow-ups, Metrorail has now completed retraining for individuals who were trained and tested on outdated RWP procedures after updates. Metrorail last month revoked qualifications for those that had not been retrained or had left Metrorail. This addresses a safety issue we identified and communicated to Metrorail back in January. We are also evaluating additional information Metrorail provided related to roadway worker protection on the yellow line between LaFont Plaza and Pentagon stations. After WMSC direction, Metrorail identified a curve in the area as a hotspot requiring foul time protection or greater to ensure the safety of personnel. Our team observed Metrorail personnel in the field and is reviewing the additional information that Metrorail provided. As Ms. Samara Singha noted last month, there were 2 instances this spring in which train operators moved trains with automatic train protection, or ATP, cut out without the safety precautions required by Metrorail's rules. ATP, when operational, is designed to reduce the risk of collision by stopping trains that approach another train or a fixed work zone wherein shunts are in place. The WMSC identified in mid-July that Metrorail's electronic systems are indicating that movement without ATP is occurring repeatedly at a variety of locations across the system. Metrorail had not identified or acted upon those indications. Investigation following our identification and communication of the issue has found that many of the instances are likely false indications, and that Metrorail has not been acting on these indications that passenger trains are operating without ATP, a fundamental safety system. Improper movement without ATP occurred at least twice in the last few months. In an event on April 15th, when an operator improperly moved a train without ATP, the control screen and event logs depicted operation without ATP, yet no action was taken. This was a real, not false indication. Any improper movement risks a catastrophic collision with another train or personnel in a fixed work zone. Rail Operations Control Center controllers have been trained to contact train operators when there's an indication that ATP is cut out, and to dispatch a supervisor or car maintenance personnel to check on the train, but that's not been occurring. We continue to work with Metrorail to understand the causes of these indications and what Metrorail is doing to ensure that such indications are recognized and appropriately addressed. We are similarly working with Metrorail regarding train to wayside communications issues that Metrorail had not identified or addressed until the WMSC identified improper and missing indications related to automatic train operation this winter. Our data review followed confirmation that at least one operator had operated a train in ATO without authorization, resulting in a station overrun on March 17th. Last week, we observed other examples of indications of specific trains operating in ATO for entire trips that Metrorail had not taken action to address. We have again raised these issues to Metrorail. As a result, Metrorail directed Rail Operations Control Center managers and controllers last week to ensure that they contact train operators when the mode of operation is showing ATO, dispatch car maintenance to investigate, and properly document the event in Metrorail's maintenance management system. Metrorail has committed to evaluating its AIM system that displays information to rail controllers and others to include how the data is processed, evaluated, and acted on. Our team continues to review Metrorail's train operator training and certification practices. This includes certifications without completing all of the required training tasks and a lack of progress on physical characteristics training. We've observed that the newest operators have been involved in serious safety events. Later in this meeting, staff will present a report related to an improper movement on the Green Line in February that involved a new operator who had been certified without completing all of the required certification tasks. In this case, the train operator moved against the normal flow of traffic without permission or protection against collision. Metrorail as an organization did not identify this improper movement. Through our independent oversight, the WMSC did. We informed Metrorail and initiated the investigation. This improper movement occurred during an evaluation for life safety reasons, elsewhere on the line. 2 recent red signal overruns being investigated also involve new operators. For example, an operator who overran a red signal near West Falls Church last month had just certified on July 6th. The operator said afterward that they believed they had a flashing lunar signal indicating permission to proceed on a diverging route. However, this signal was for an adjacent track. The signal for this operator was red. This is another example of the importance of physical characteristics training. Metrorail is behind its original schedule for implementing a corrective action plan for physical characteristics training. Metrorail now has a revised schedule for implementation. This operator's certification records did not demonstrate that they had completed all required certification tasks. Specifically, this included no indication that the operator demonstrated the ability to shut off environmental systems, which would be required for the safety of riders in the event of smoke in the tunnel. In another event, an operator overran a red signal at Reagan National Airport Station on track 1. Had a train departed on the adjacent track where there was a proceed signal, this red signal overrun could have resulted in a collision. Those investigations continue and will progress to final reports that will be presented at a future meeting for your consideration. In the interim, Metrorail has committed to more field checks, including of new operators, to evaluating skill deficiencies of operators of varying experience levels, and to reviewing whether radio communications are occurring as required by Metrorail rules and procedures. The WMSC will continue to monitor train operator training and certification to determine if additional action is needed. We are also investigating a power restoration event that occurred on June 27th. During that event, power was de-energized via an emergency trip station, or ETS push button, just outside Eastern Market Station. Metrorail personnel restored power without determining why it had been de-energized in the first place. Video review shows that a person went beyond the end gate and de-energized power. However, personnel at the Power Operations Center in the ROC, the Rail Operations Control Center, re-energized power almost immediately without determining whether there was an emergency or if individuals were on the roadway. Given conflicting information from Metrorail personnel about ETS boxes and their functionality, we are working to ensure that Metrorail understands how its ETS boxes function and what safety processes are required when an ETS box is used to de-energize power. As you mentioned, Chair Hart, later in the meeting, the commissioners will consider the annual revision to our program standard. As Metrorail safety regulator, this is an overarching document that sets out requirements and expectations. The annual revision reflects adjustments that we have identified that will improve our oversight of Metrorail's response. It also includes adjustments made in relation to Metrorail's input, including their comments on the draft revision. Also, in keeping with continuous improvement, our program standard and federal regulations, Metrorail's overarching safety document, its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTASP, is currently in Metrorail's annual revision process. WMSC staff have provided feedback to Metrorail on a draft as provided for by our processes. We expect the annual PTASP revision signed by the accountable executive and approved by the WMATA board will come to you for approval this fall. We continue our work to adjust our inspections program to reflect new and upcoming federal risk-based inspection requirements. Our compact already provides for our access to Metrorail facilities and data, which is one of the federal requirements. As we finalize our inspection program improvements in the coming months, we will continue our consultation with Metrorail on specific details as appropriate. I would also note that the staff distributed the annual reports that you approved at the last public meeting as required by our compact to the governors, mayor, general assembly leaders, DC Council Chair, Federal Transit Administration, and Metrorail's board and general manager. The reports are now available on our public website. That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Dr. Meyer?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Laube.
Mr. Meyer, you talked about on the 7,000 car, you talked about 2 incidents where wheel bearings were migrating. I had not realized that wheel bearing migrating on the axle was an issue. Is this a common issue?
It's not common, but the places where wheel movement are detected or can be detected are through what we've talked about many, many times, taking this back-to-back measurement. But during the inspection process where back-to-back measurements are taken, there's also the use of a feeler gauge between the journal bearing and the back of the back of the wheel to see if there's been any separation at all. And that's something that we've been paying attention to, and we've seen these recent migrations as well. Since there's not a place for the bearings to go, it almost has to indicate that the wheel is moving.
Okay, so it's more a wheel problem rather than a bearing problem. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I'd invite staff to speak up if I misspeak. But the bearings themselves are against a stop. So a gap arriving there or a gap being detected there is strongly suggestive of wheel movement.
Okay, I was concerned about it because I know that one of the fixes for the 7,000 cars will include doing a more of an interference fit for the wheels, but I hadn't heard bearings mentioned. There's no concern that something needs to be done with the bearing seats also.
Because the bearings are physically seated against a stop, it's believed that the problem to be addressed is the migration of the wheels as opposed to the bearings. I'll ask Ms. Samara Singha to correct me or speak up if I'm misspeaking there.
No, there's nothing further to add on that.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Labby. We will now move on to safety event investigation reports that are being presented today. We will hear presentations on all of the reports, then consider a single motion on all of the reports that we are prepared to adopt. If any commissioner wishes to remove a report from the group that we will consider for adoption as a single vote, please indicate that at the end of the presentation on that report. Ms. Keyrose, would you please present the first report?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0232 relates to an evacuation for life safety reasons of Shaw Howard University Station and the improper movement of a train during the response without protections against collision. I will first provide a summary of the evacuation, then provide details regarding the improper movement. This occurred on February 9th, 2023. Shaw Howard University Station was evacuated after a train operator reported what appeared to be smoke coming from their train as the train entered the station. The rail traffic controller instructed the train operator to offload the train. Other personnel in the Rail Operations Control Center called for a DC fire and EMS response and activated emergency ventilation fans. Train service through the station was stopped, and the station manager was directed to report to the platform. The station manager reported smoke at the rear of the train and in the tunnel. The operator of another train, which was not carrying passengers, conducted an inspection and did not identify any smoke between Columbia Heights Station and Mount Vernon Square Station. Fire department personnel observed that the apparent smoke on the station platform was dissipating. Metrorail concluded that there had not been a fire. Metrorail cleared the area without being able to identify the source of the apparent smoke. During separate overnight work after train service resumed, Metrorail identified a discharged fire extinguisher on the roadway in the tunnel just outside the station. No fire extinguishers were missing from the train that was involved in this event. The investigation could not determine why the fire extinguisher discharged, but concluded that the apparent smoke was actually the fire extinguisher discharging. Shifting to the improper movement without protections against collision. During the evacuation at Shaw Howard University Station, other trains were being turned back elsewhere on the Green Line. One of those trains was train 503. During this process, the train operator of train 503 moved against the normal flow of traffic without permission or protection. This followed incomplete instructions and communications between the radio, rail traffic controller, and the train operator. The rail traffic controller intended for the train operator of train 503 at Georgia Avenue Petworth Station to offload their train, move forward beyond the interlocking, then reverse ends to the other operating cab and enter service back toward Greenbelt Station. Instead, the train operator believed that they were to reverse ends on the same track to return toward Greenbelt. The radio communications did not include 100% repeat back. The rail controller's digital control screen showed that the train operator was at the wrong end of the train. The rail traffic controller still acknowledged the operator's transmission, stating that they would be operating toward Greenbelt, and provided a permissive block to clear the station, key down, and reverse ends. The train operator said they had already reversed ends and asked if they were supposed to verify the signal and reverse again. There is no signal at the end of the platform where the train operator was. The rail traffic controller said yes, and further said the train operator was to cross through the Georgia Avenue interlocking. The train operator did not know that the interlocking and the relevant signal were behind their train, not ahead of it. The rail traffic controller did not recognize that the train operator was already at the greenbelt end of the train. The train operator activated stop and proceed mode to move without speed commands and moved against the normal flow of traffic without protection. The train reached the maximum speed of 15 miles per hour allowed when using the stop and proceed mode. The rail traffic controllers noticed the improper movement, and the radio rail traffic controller instructed the train operator to stop the train. The train stopped after moving 379 feet. The rail traffic controller told the train operator they were keyed up on the wrong end. This improper movement was not acted upon further by Metrorail. Contrary to Metrorail policy, Metrorail allowed the train operator, rail traffic controller, and other ROCC personnel to remain in service. The rail traffic controller instructed the train operator to return to the other end of the train, move the train back through the station and past the interlocking, then cross over to the correct track to operate back toward Greenbelt Station. The WMSC identified the improper movement through independent monitoring of Metrorail data and systems. We communicated the safety event to Metrorail and ensured it was investigated. Metrorail had certified the train operator of train 503 for the first time 1 month before this event. The train operator failed their first certification attempt on January 9th, 2023. This included failures related to troubleshooting exercises related to the holding brake, stop and proceed, cutting out trucks, and a door issue. Metrorail's performance standardization manual provides that individuals who fail a certification attempt are to be sent to rail training or a senior rail supervisor for retraining of up to 2 days and must then retest the following day. However, Metrorail provided a retest with different troubleshooting scenarios later that same day, January 9th. Metrorail recorded these scenarios as pass. Metrorail certified this operator the same day that the operator had failed. Metrorail's documented requirements state that it usually requires extensive formal retraining following a failed certification. This operator did not receive any reinstruction and was provided with the retest opportunity on the same day. Rail training leadership stated during this investigation that they do not perform the retraining as provided for in Metrorail certification manual. The rail transportation quality assurance, quality control personnel responsible for certification stated they do not ensure personnel who fail their certification receive retraining. The train operator certification records and associated Metrorail data are also demonstrate that the train operator did not complete all requirements during the initial certification. Instead, Metrorail conducted the certification with 2 trainee train operators on board, one at each end of the train. This led to the trainee train operators each only being asked to demonstrate some of the steps required for certification. Some of the steps that were not conducted according to the train operator's interview or records included demonstration of environmental system operation. This is necessary to protect the health and safety of riders and personnel in emergencies, such as smoke events in tunnels. Metrorail added specific steps related to certifying personnel on the environmental system shutoff following the 2015 smoke accident near LaFont Plaza Station. For both trainee operators who were certified despite operating at opposite ends of the same train, Metrorail certification documents showed exact same round number times for each operator in multiple areas. This train operator was a new operator who had been part of the training classes that Metrorail had shortened contrary to its training requirements. The train operator said in an interview that they had never completed a full reverse move without another train operator at the other end of the train to conduct parts of the movement prior to the move in this event. The WMSC is continuing a more detailed review of the recent train operator certification records and associated data. This includes recertification records. Metrorail designed these certification requirements to demonstrate the safety tasks required in an emergency, in normal operations, and in abnormal operations, because these are critical to the safety of personnel and riders. Metrorail has several open corrective action plans that is implementing that relate to this investigation, including those to address findings from our rail operations audit issued last year. In addition, Metrorail instructed its personnel conducting certification to follow documented requirements, including ensuring that each operator demonstrates the required safety tasks and ensuring that certification is not conducted with train operators at each end of the train. Metrorail also addressed oversight deficiencies with the Rail Operations Control Center Operations Manager. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key Rose. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Ms. Key Rose?
All I have to say is this is so unacceptable. It's that they would allow this to happen.
Any staff comment on that?
Dr. Meyer, may I add, Commissioner Farad and Chair Hart. So the issues that Ms. Quiroz just recounted for you pertaining to train operator certification and all the associated activities that support that, including ensuring that Metrorail follows documented requirements in ensuring that operators are trained, meeting the requirements that Metrorail itself has designated as being critical to ensuring train operators are ready and prepared and knowledgeable in order to conduct their duties of carrying passengers and operating in the system that also involves roadway worker personnel. So these are things that we continue to pursue. We have several activities that are underway, and as Ms. Quiroz pointed out, and Dr. Meyer pointed out earlier in his remarks, we continue to gather information to evaluate whether or not additional WMSC actions are required in this regard. The train operator certification has been very much a central area of focus for us for the last 18 months. Over various periods of time since March of 2022, we have raised the focus on train operator certification and gotten Metro to understand the importance of adhering to the requirements they themselves have set for themselves to create train operators, to certify train operators. And in addition to that, there are rules and procedures in communicating, in understanding what is being said, in making sure that actions are not undertaken unless individuals are clear on what is required of them in interactions between various units of the organization. And so all of these things are things that we are pursuing, gathering information and elevating these to Metrorail's various levels of the organization, and then considering, based on our information research, on considering additional action. So I just want to recognize that we understand and hear what both Chair Hart, you are saying, and Commissioner Farad in terms of these conditions are unacceptable.
Thank you, Ms. Marsing. That's very helpful. Any other staff comment before I move on to the next report?
I had a couple of questions, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Louder.
I wanted to I agree with the part about certification and being such a unacceptable situation where Washington Metro seems to be taking shortcuts, especially after the history we've had with certifications over the last year. And I understand that Washington Metro at the end of the last year, December 2022, reorganized so that now training is under the responsibilities for the chief safety officer. Does that include certification, or is that or training and certification two different things?
Ms. Quiroz, will you have that information whether rail operator train?
Can I answer for that, Ms. Quiroz? So ARTRA, rail transportation, is still responsible for certification. That falls under the Executive Vice President of Rail Transportation. Training is now falling under the Department of SAFE. So they are two separate departments.
So that's very interesting because I believe the chief operating officer had to resign because of certification issues before, and apparently there's still shortcuts going on within this group. So, you know, I think after the history of problems with certification, I would expect that this would be one area that they would get right. And apparently they're still not paying proper attention to this. I had one other question, and it had to do with this radio repeat back requirement. This is a requirement of Washington Metro that radio instructions are repeated back 100% by those receiving it. Who's responsible to make sure that 100% repeat back is completed?
So they're in real time, the operator is responsible and the rail traffic controller is responsible when it's happening. So they both have responsibilities in their procedures and their SOPs to make sure that they're getting their 100% repeat back. So if an operator is unclear, they repeat it again, or if they can't hear the rail traffic controller, they're supposed to ask them to repeat, and the same on the controller end. And ROCC management does perform regular audits on their rail traffic controllers, and SAFE has said they will increase their audits on train operators.
So there is a requirement for the ROC controller, train controller, to insist that he gets 100% repeat back from the operator, and obviously it's the duty of the operator to provide that 100% repeat back. But this again is an issue that we've had over the years, over and over again, and usually it results in an instruction that's not understood and not implemented the way it was intended. And here is another example of it. But I just wonder how many times we have to talk about these issues before Washington Metro takes some actions to fix it. I mean, a ROC controller who doesn't insist on 100% repeat back, he's right there. There's managers right there. I know you do audits, but it would seem fairly simple to listen to the radio and say, hey, you didn't insist on 100% repeat back and correct the problem immediately. But again, it seems to go on and on and on. I just wonder if there's other ways that Washington Metro Safety Commission can get WMATA's attention on these issues so that they actually correct them once and for all, and we don't have to talk about them every 6 weeks.
That's a very good point, Commissioner Lobby. My question is whether there's radio frequency congestion to the extent that it interferes with the 100% readback.
There certainly is a degree of that. It is a very, particularly on the on some of the frequencies, there's a great deal of radio usage, but that's not really the central issue. And I think I did want to communicate that we hear Commissioner Lobby very clearly, and in his request that we think about other tools that we may be able to use to address these recurring issues.
And the fact that there is the ongoing radio issues and congestion issues, that makes these 100% repeat backs all the more important, that you keep doing it until you get it right. But especially in these emergency situations or unusual situations where instructions are issued, this 100% repeat back is really the safety net to catch unintended mistakes in transmission of these instructions. And I'm really surprised that Washington Metro hasn't cured this issue at this point. This is, if I put on my Class 1 railroad hat, this is absolutely essential for safe operations of a freight railroad and for a passenger railroad that's carrying people every day. you've got to get it right. And I think it's high time that they cured this problem and got it right.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Any further response from staff on that?
No particular response other than to underscore that we definitely concur, and whether a property is FR regulated or not, effective communications are critical to safety. We agree, and we will explore every tool in our toolbox.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Any more questions regarding this report before I move on to the next one? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Keyroads, would you please present the next report?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0233 relates to a station overrun, a train stranded between stations for an extended period, and the subsequent identification of a train operator under the influence of alcohol. This began on December 23rd, 2022. A train overran Van Dorn Street Station by about 2 car lengths around 10:33 p.m. Metrorail did not identify the station overrun. After briefly stopping the train operator continued on without reporting the overrun, and the train then stopped between stations. The train remained between stations for approximately 40 minutes with no communication from the train operator. Later, the train operator moved the train to Franconia Springfield Station and attempted to begin operating back toward downtown Largo Station. Metro Transit Police and other personnel removed the train operator from the cab before the train operator moved the train back toward downtown Largo. They determined there were indications the operator had used alcohol, which was later verified through law enforcement tests. The train operator had first reported for duty at the Alexandria Rail Yard at 9:40 a.m. on December 23rd. The train operator was assigned to work in the yard from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and then to work as directed from Huntington Station from 5:28 p.m. to 1:06 a.m. As directed means the train operator has no specific trips assigned, but will be assigned by the terminal supervisor or Rail Operations Control Center to take over trains when needed due to disruptions, personal breaks, or other issues. During the daytime yard assignment, the train operator was not directed to operate any trains. CCTV shows the train operator primarily stayed in their personal vehicle. They left the yard and returned twice, and later left again at 1:46 p.m. Individuals who interacted with the train operator during this yard assignment stated during the investigation that the train operator did not appear to be intoxicated at the time. The train operator was supposed to report to Huntington Station by 5:28 p.m. CCTV shows the train operator was not at Huntington Station or Alexandria Rail Yard between 5:28 p.m. and 7:53 p.m. Metro Rail does not require a train operator returning to work who has already received their manifest to report to a depot clerk or other individual upon returning to duty for the remainder of their workday. Metro Rail also does not require terminal supervisors, interlocking operators, or management to assess personnel prior to assigning them work when part of a second assignment of the day. At 7:30 p.m., the Huntington terminal supervisor attempted to contact the train operator via radio, but got no response. In a response to a subsequent second communication attempt, the train operator responded that they were at the yard. CCTV shows the train operator drove back into the yard after this exchange. The train operator then went to the employee platform at the yard to board a train. The train operator was picked up by a train with a train operator and rail supervisor on board. In investigative interviews, neither reported observing signs of intoxication. The train operator later involved in the station overrun took over the train operation at King Street Station. The rail supervisor remained on the train to Stadium Army Station. During the trip to downtown Largo, the train stopped short of the end of the platform at several stations. This included stopping 32 feet short at Potomac Avenue and 28 feet short at Capitol South, each while the rail supervisor was still on the train. This was a 6-car train, so this deviation from safety procedures did not lead to any doors opening off the rear of the platform. At downtown Largo Station, the train operator exited the station and briefly entered the terminal area where there's a break room and the terminal supervisor's work area. The train operator exited and remained on the walkway beyond the platform end gate. The train operator then walked down the platform to the lead car for their trip to Franconia Springfield Station. CCTV shows the operator displaying signs of impairment. The train operator was swaying and not walking in a straight line. The train operator operated the train toward Franconia Springfield Station. At Eastern Market Station, the train stopped 46 feet short of the required stopping location at the end of the station platform. This is about two-thirds of a car length short of the 8-car marker. At Braddock Road Station, the train operator entered the station more slowly than previous stations and almost stopped short. At King Street Station, the train operator operated the doors without looking out the window as required to ensure that it was safe to do so. At Van Dorn Street Station, the train operator operated the train past the end of the station platform. The train operator stopped momentarily with the front 2 cars beyond the platform, did not service the station, and continued toward Franconia Springfield Station. There were approximately 18 passengers on board at that time. As the train was moving toward Franconia Springfield Station, the train lost speed commands. This led to the brakes being automatically applied. The train stopped about 1 mile from Van Dorn Street Station. The train operator moved the master controller to B5 braking mode. About 5 minutes later, speed commands began fluctuating between 0, 65, and 59 miles per hour. The train operator did not take any action and did not communicate with the Rail Operations Control Center. The train remained stopped with the train operator out of communication for approximately 40 minutes. About 10 minutes after the train stopped, the Huntington Terminal supervisor had identified that the train was between stations on the opposite line and called the Rail Operations Control Center to ask what was occurring with that train and offer to check on the train operator. This call triggered the rail controllers, who had not identified the train stop for an extended period between stations, to attempt to contact the train operator. The rail controllers had not acted upon the large timer on the big board in the ROCC that shows trains that have stopped for more than 1 minute. The train operator did not respond to that communication from the ROCC or subsequent radio communications. By that time, another train was behind train 406. Rail controllers directed the train operator of that train, train 407, to sound their horn to alert the other operator. At 10:51 p.m., the Rail Operations Control Center directed the train operator of train 407 to bring their riders back to Van Dorn Station, then move to track 1 to pull adjacent to train 406. The Rail Operations Control Center Assistant Operations Manager contacted Metro Transit Police to report that the train was stopped and they could not contact the train operator. The MTPD dispatcher stated they had received a text that riders had been stuck on the train and they think the operator was under the influence. The train operator did not respond to passengers' attempts to contact them through the emergency intercom. At 10:57 p.m., 23 minutes after the train stopped, the Assistant Operations Manager requested a Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department response with a medic to Franconia Springfield Station. At 11:12 p.m., a rail transportation supervisor, Metro Transit Police Department personnel, and medics had boarded train 407 at Van Dorn Street Station. The rail traffic controller instructed the train operator of train 407 to proceed to train 406 and perform close-in procedures. As the train was moving closer, the train operator of the stop train, train 406, radioed at 11:16 p.m. "Train moving, man." The train operator confirmed there were passengers on board. Vehicle data shows the train operator moved the master controller to maximum P5 power mode. The train reached Franconia Springfield Station at 11:19 p.m. At Franconia Springfield, the train operator opened the doors on the correct side of the train, closed the doors 12 seconds later, then reversed ends and prepared to operate back toward downtown Largo. Metro Transit Police Department and other Metro Rail personnel ran down the platform to stop the operator. Metro Rail personnel identified that the operator showed signs of intoxication. The operator was not taken down for Department of Transportation alcohol testing. Instead, the operator was taken to the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. Field sobriety tests and tests conducted following the operator's arrest indicated that the train operator was under the influence of alcohol. Each test was above the Federal Transit Administration requirement of 0.04 and above Metrorail's limit of 0.02 that trigger requirements to enter an employee assistance program in addition to disciplinary action. In addition to these limits, Metrorail employees and contractors who perform safety-sensitive functions are not permitted to consume alcohol within 4 hours before performing such functions or while performing such functions. Metrorail policy provides for immediate termination of personnel found to use, sell, or possess drugs or alcohol while on duty. This is an example of a station overrun occurring as a result of underlying hazards. In this case, the investigation determined the direct underlying hazard to be primarily related to Metrorail's Fitness for Duty program and the operator's intoxication. Had Metrorail detected and acted upon the overrun and failure to service Van Dorn Street Station, Metrorail could have provided a timelier response. In other cases, investigations related to station overruns, such as the National Transportation Safety Board's investigation into the 1996 Shady Grove collision, have identified that underlying hazards indicated or caused by station overruns and their aftermath can be related to issues such as system conditions, uncorrected system design deficiencies, or an action on available safety data. As that NTSB investigation also documented, station overruns can also lead to trains not receiving the intended speed commands due to the train not being positioned as required to communicate with wayside systems positioned within the platform limits. In the 1996 Shady Grove collision, this led to the train defaulting to maximum 75 mile/hour speed commands. The ability of Metrorail to proactively identify and subsequently mitigate such hazards that may be underlying or result from station overruns through detailed investigation and analysis before an injury or fatality is a reason the WMSC program standard requires Metrorail to report these safety events when trains stop with a door or more beyond the platform limits. This summer, Metrorail has experienced an increase in station overrun events. The WMSC investigations team is working with Metrorail to evaluate this trend and Metrorail's planned mitigations. As interim mitigations following this event, Metrorail reminded rail transportation personnel about general drug and alcohol rules. Metrorail also communicated to terminal supervisors the importance of overseeing as directed operators and is evaluating improvements to the verification form used to account for train operators at each assigned location. Metrorail fired the train operator. Metrorail is in the process of implementing corrective action plan C0129 to address a WMSC Fitness for Duty audit finding that Metrorail does not have a documented procedure for and training to carry out fitness for duty checks prior to or during shifts on a regular basis for all covered employees as specified in the Active Fitness for Duty standard. Metrorail did not report this event to the WMSC within the required 2 hours. The station overrun occurred at 10:33 p.m. Metrorail did not report the safety event to the WMSC until 7:33 a.m. the following day. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key Rose. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Key Rose?
I don't have a question, Chair Hart, but a comment. I think Ms. Kiro's presentation stands alone about how, I don't know how many things, 10, 15 things went wrong here. I'm happy to see that this individual is no longer operating trains on Washington Metro, but I understand that there may be a chance that he continues as an employee of Washington Metro. Is that true?
That's something that we will monitor closely. There is a process underway that is usually and normally followed after a termination occurs, and we'll watch that process very, very closely and be prepared if necessary to take any appropriate action.
I was surprised to see that the doors were open for only 12 seconds at the terminal station. I assume that the riders that had been stuck on the train on the right of way for 40 or 50 minutes, took that opportunity to get off very quickly and nobody was left on the train. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
I'm still trying to digest how a train could stop for 40 minutes in the system without creating significant disruption to the system, plus having a bunch of 911 calls from a bunch of stranded passengers. I don't understand how 40 minutes is a long time to be sitting on a train without any word from the operator.
Yeah, so the rail traffic controllers became aware that the train was stopped about 10 minutes after. And then after they tried multiple times to get the train operator on the radio, they contacted the terminal supervisor to see if maybe he had switched over to the terminal radio. And then a train was coming behind it. So that's when they started to say, okay, let's try to get the train to honk at him. Then they got the personnel on there that ultimately they were going to have their plan was to do the close-in procedures, have transit and the emergency personnel exit the train and actually go physically walk to the cab. So that was the next step. And that's when the train operator woke up and started moving the train on their own.
Also, what is the requirements for the supervisor that was on the train when they saw that the train was missing the marks each time? They're not obligated to say something or to report that, because prior to them even stopping for the 40 minutes, there was a supervisor who was on the train who saw that they missed several marks. Where's their responsibility come in?
Yes, the supervisor was on that one, the trip that the train operator was operating towards downtown Largo Station, and they should have reported that. So there's any disciplinary action or discussion with the supervisor on their responsibilities, and they could have avoided a lot of that if they had just noticed what was going on, or they just trying to go home. Yeah, there was, I'm not sure about disciplinary action, but definitely we interviewed the supervisor, and there was staff notice sent out also reminding everyone about the drug and alcohol policy, and also pertaining to their fitness for duty policy. That is everyone's responsibility. So I don't necessarily think that's a solution, that when something actually goes wrong, that you just send out another notice. I mean, there has to be some kind of interaction or some kind of action that shows a supervisor. The supervisor might need to go for some additional training as well, if they didn't even notice certain signs. If they didn't even notice certain signs when the person was late, who said they were in the yard and they really weren't in the yard, that should have been some triggers also when they didn't come on board by 5:28 as they were responsible for. So there's more to one person in here, and it can't be a whole group that just goes along with whatever they decide to say. So right.
Is it possible, this question, is it possible the supervisor, since this was a 6-car train, and I think in each instance the train stopped short, is it possible the supervisor wouldn't even have noticed?
You mean because the train was shorter than the station?
Well, was the train short of the station or a train short of the end? You know, the train's supposed to go to the end, and it stopped. I didn't think it was short of the station. It was short of the end, right? Or am I wrong?
Right. It didn't make it all the way to the 8-car marker, to short of the end. Right.
Yeah. So all the doors would have opened onto a platform. There wouldn't have been necessarily that obvious. Maybe I'm wrong. Just asking the question.
It is possible if the supervisor, we don't know exactly where they were the entire trip. If they were noticing the door operations the whole time, they could have been sitting down and not. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Also, I did want to mention that They have updated the depot clerk SOP recently to include when you have these split shifts where a train operator works in the morning and then they have this break in the middle and they come back in the evening, that the terminal supervisor is to make contact with them for their on-duty time. And if they are unable to contact them, the terminal supervisor will call the depot clerk and let them know, and the depot clerk will ensure that the train operator is not on the clock. So that's one thing they did add, and they did put clear language in the SOP regarding also the fitness for duty information.
I just wanted to mention, while there's an opening, that Commissioner Bob is having some internet difficulties and is attempting to rejoin us after a reboot.
Also, doesn't the split shift raise potential fatigue issues? Because if the guy fell asleep allegedly, then that would certainly highlight that as a possibility. I wonder how much the fatigue issues were looked into.
I would just note, not specifically with regard to this investigation, that in transit rail, where there's a morning rush and an evening rush, and maybe in post-pandemic operations, we'll find different service patterns or what customers need. But in transit rail and even passenger commuter rail, where there's a morning rush and an evening rush, these split shifts with maybe about a 4-hour period of not being on duty, being off duty in the middle of the day are very, very common. Folks, for instance, throughout the whole New York and Connecticut region, when they take trains, train operators and locomotive engineers who take train operators into, say, Grand Central Terminal, then often have quite a period of time where they're no longer on duty and are even able to sleep. In fact, sleeping facilities are provided so that they're rested when they need to return to take trains to the outlying areas in the evening.
Well, it sounds like there's certainly room for improvement in running this airline. Are there any more questions regarding this event? Okay, hearing none. Operations expert Bruce Walker, would you please present the next report?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0234 relates to an improper roadway worker protection on February 26, 2023, during a Metro Rail emergency exercise at Wheaton Station. A rail supervisor who was part of the exercise entered the adjacent active passenger track, which was not part of the exercise, without required RWP protection or roadway worker protection. I and other WMSC staff on site identified the possible improper roadway worker protection as we communicated to Metro personnel what we heard over the radio. Further investigation determined that the rail supervisor had actually entered track 1 at the direction of the exercise rail traffic controller without required protection in place. The further investigation was required to confirm that the radio communication heard by our team reflected real-world actions, not simulated radio communications as part of the exercise. The purpose of the exercise is to provide practice in a controlled environment to improve response and coordination during a rail emergency. Exercises also include interjects that create various scenarios to make the situations more like a rail event. Personnel participating in the event are unaware of these injects until those injects are presented to them. These may include information about conditions, additional safety information, or hiccups in response, such as the ability to control power or communications. We were there to observe the exercise as part of our regular oversight activities. Prior to these exercises, participants are provided instructions on their roles and given a safety briefing that includes exercise boundaries. Briefings occurred at the exercise for personnel on site at Wheaton Station. Ops 11 channel was designated as the radio channel for use during this exercise. In addition, all radio transmissions were to begin with the words exercise, exercise, exercise. This terminology was not used throughout the exercise. For the exercise, Metro Rail established a work zone using exclusive track occupancy protection on track 2 to protect the exercise participants. When the system opened for service, Metro Rail maintained passenger service on track 1 with trains single tracking through the station without stopping. Track 1 remained in active passenger service or as an active passenger track. The exercise scenario was a derailment in the tunnel just beyond the platform limits at Wheaton Station on Track 2. The exercise started at 8:56 a.m. when the train operator notified the exercise rail traffic controller via Ops 11 that the train had derailed. During the simulated response, a warning strobe alarm device, typically referred to as a WSAD, sounded in the exercise work zone. This alarm indicated that third rail power may have been unexpectedly restored. In response, the exercise rail traffic controller instructed a rail transportation supervisor to confirm that third rail power was de-energized on both tracks 2 and track 1. This was in coordination with the exercise incident command. This was not in coordination with the exercise incident command or identified by the exercise controller responsible for the drill. In a rail derailment, Metro Rail procedures call for power to be de-energized on both tracks and for personnel to act in accordance with the direction from the incident command. The rail supervisor exited the exercise area. The rail supervisor entered track 1. This was an active track that Metro had intended to be off limits to the exercise participants. The rail supervisor checked the status of third rail power on that active track. The rail supervisor reported that the third rail power was energized. The rail supervisor did not have foul time or any other protection while on the active track. In an interview for this investigation, the exercise rail traffic controller stated that they did not receive a briefing before the exercise began and that they were not aware that the exercise was restricted to track 2 only. The rail supervisor stated during an interview that their role in the exercise was switched on the day of the exercise. Review of the closed circuit television and other evidence demonstrates that the rail supervisor used their key to enter the area of refuge, then access track 1 to enter the roadway with a hot stick. The exercise rail traffic controller stated to others in the portion of the rail operations control center being used for the exercise that they hoped the supervisor had not gone to the roadway. Metro personnel did not take any actions to determine whether this safety event occurred. The rail traffic controller had no way of knowing what parts of the activity were simulated as part of the exercise and which parts of the field were actually occurring. Radio transmissions throughout the exercise were not constantly prefaced with the words exercise, exercise, exercise. The rail controller, the rail supervisor stated in the interview that they did not remember hearing the rail traffic controller announce exercise and stated that they were confused at times during the exercise. The rail traffic controller and rail supervisor also reported challenges with radio transmission during the event. As I explained, our WMSC observers heard the radio communication regarding the supervisor and power energization and heard the WSAD alarm. At the time the rail supervisor entered track 1, our personnel were on the train that were being treated as derailed for the exercise and at the incident command post outside the station. We communicated the concern on site regarding the possible entry into track 1 of the Metro Rail exercise organizers. Due to the WMSC raising the concern, Metro Rail and the WMSC conducted further investigation and determined the supervisor had in fact entered the track 1 portion without protection while train movement was happening through the area. Exercise participants later determined that the WSAD had not been placed properly and had accidentally been tripped during the use of the emergency tunnel evacuation card. They reset the WSAD. Metro Rail also did not properly control entry into the area of the exercise. A passenger was able to enter the station and access the platform where the exercise was taking place, despite the station being closed. In the event of a similar real-life emergency, Metro procedures call for the station to be closed for the response. Event scene control is important to the safety and effectiveness of first responders and to the overall response. Metro Rail emergency exercises are important learning opportunities as part of Metro's continuous improvement process, but must be conducted safely. In response to the event, Metro Rail is reviewing its playbook for emergency exercises to modify procedures for future drills. Metro has also reviewed emergency drill instructions and will implement improved visual and physical barriers on warning to control players in the exercise. Metro is also implementing script instructions and additional monitoring and interventions to avoid conflicting instructions or actions at the drill site, simulated control centers, and staging areas. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Walker?
I have some questions, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby.
Well, maybe it's not a question, maybe it's a comment. I mean, on this exercise, which is designed to help Washington Metro basically rehearse their emergency procedures, about 5 or 6 things went wrong here. They had a bad exercise briefing. They decided not to use exercise, the radio procedure, which is required. And then they ended up with both people in the station that shouldn't have been there, and they ended up with a supervisor on track 1. After listening to Ms. Quiros' presentation on the unresponsive operator, and then listening to this presentation on this exercise that went bad, and in front of the Washington Metro Safety Commission witnesses, if I were a manager on Washington Metro, from the first line managers right to the very top, I would be extremely embarrassed over this kind of thing going on their property. These are basic safety processes that Washington Metro should be able to pull off, without all these issues. And I'd be extremely embarrassed to have these types of events going on my property. That's about all I have to say on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Any other comments or questions from any of the other commissioners? Or staff comments to respond to Commissioner Lobby? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Quiros, would you please present the next reports?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0235 relates to an evacuation for life safety reasons of Clarendon Station on March 7th, 2023. A rider reported smoke on the platform to the station manager. The station manager went to the platform and confirmed there was smoke. The station manager returned to the kiosk and reported to the Rail Operations Information Center that smoke was entering the station from the tunnel on track 1. The station manager reported that they were evacuated the station. Metro Transit Police and Arlington County Fire Department personnel responded. The plant desk in the Rail Operations Control Center activated emergency ventilation fans at 8:20 a.m., 12 minutes after the station manager reported the smoke to the information controller. The fans cleared the smoke. The investigation could not determine the source of the smoke. Inspections did not identify any wayside damage, and no rail cars were identified with issues such as stuck brakes that may have caused the smoke. Investigation Whiskey 0236 relates to a collision at Crystal City Station on March 9th, 2023. Metro Rail effectively responded to this event. Investigation Whiskey 0237 relates to an evacuation for life safety reasons of the Transportation and Police Building at the Dulles Rail Yard on March 21st, 2023. At 1:58 a.m., a rail transportation depot clerk reported a burning smell to the Rail Operations Control Center. A train operator notified the yard's interlocking operator that the building was being evacuated. The depot clerk exited the building, then returned and activated the fire alarm pull station. The ROCC Assistant Operations Manager requested Loudoun County Fire and Rescue response. Metro Rail's alarm monitoring contractor notified the Maintenance Operations Center that the pull station had been activated. Fire department personnel found no signs of smoke in the building and reset the alarm. They suggested the smell may have come from a controlled brush fire. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Quiros. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Quiros? Okay, and it was very good to hear from you that about the response that was appropriate. So that's obviously good news. Mr. Walker, would you please present the remaining reports?
Yes, thank you again, Chair Hart. The remaining investigation reports relate to evacuation for life safety reasons. Investigation Whiskey 0238 relates to an evacuation of Potomac Avenue Station on March 30th, 2023, due to a report of a shooting on board a train at the station platform. No one was hurt, one rail car was damaged. Investigation Whiskey 0239 relates to an evacuation at Union Station on March 21st, 2023, due to a fire intentionally set by a rider on board a train. A rider alerted the train operator of train 107 another passenger had set a newspaper on fire as the train approached Union Station. Initially, the rail traffic controller instructed the train operator to make public address announcements at each stop requesting Metro Transit Police board the train. However, while the train was still stopped at the platform at Union Station, the station manager reported that DC police officers were at the station and were responding. CCTV shows two riders put the fire out with their feet. The station manager reported to the Rail Operations Control Center that the fire was out. The rail traffic controller initially instructed the train operator to isolate the affected rail car before changing instructions to evacuate the entire train and proceed without passengers. The train was kept out of service and taken to a rail car for inspection. Metrorail did not call for a fire department response. Investigation Whiskey 0240 relates to an evacuation of Roslyn Station and the Orange Line train on March 24th, 2023, due to a bag that a rider left on the train. A rider reported the unattended bag to Metro Transit Police when the train was between West Falls Church Station and East Falls Church Station. The transit police officer requested the Rail Operations Control Center hold the train at Roslyn Station for investigation. The train arrived at Roslyn at 5:54 p.m. Riders were evacuated from the train at 6:01 p.m. At 6:09 p.m., trains began bypassing Roslyn Station on the other track. Police evacuated Roslyn Station at 6:15 p.m. Police later determined that the bag was not a threat and cleared the station to reopen at 6:50 p.m. Investigation Whiskey 0241 relates to an evacuation of L'Enfant Plaza Station on March 2nd, 2023, due to a bomb threat. Metro Transit Police Department personnel did not initially communicate about this threat to other Metro personnel, including the Rail Operations Control Center. Personnel in the ROCC overheard transmissions on the MTPD radio channel about the emergency approximately 8 minutes after DC 911 call center informed Metro Transit Police of the threat. ROCC personnel decided to have trains bypass L'Enfant Station on both levels. A rail operations information controller directed a station manager to evacuate the station. During the response, an ROCC assistant operations manager directed the rail traffic controller to send a rail supervisor to the location of the emergency at the L'Enfant Plaza Station to Waterfront Station to remind the train operators not to stop at L'Enfant Plaza. The rail traffic controller told the supervisor that transit police would give them a ride. The rail supervisor went to the Green Line platform. A train carrying passengers that was supposed to bypass the station due to the evacuation for fire life safety reasons stopped for the supervisor. The supervisor keyed open one door to board the train after reporting that they were on the train and was moving to Waterfront. The supervisor was told by the rail traffic controller not to leave the L'Enfant Plaza station. The Rail Operations Control Center had realized they should have sent the supervisor to the incident command post and that the incident command post was located outside the L'Enfant Plaza station. As a result of the initial communications, Metro did not have a rail supervisor at the incident command post as rail forward liaison as provided for in its procedures. Police later determined that the station was safe to reopen, and thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any questions for Mr. Walker from any of the commissioners? Okay, hearing none, that completes today's investigation report presentations. Is there a motion to adopt the investigation reports that have just been presented? Whiskey 0232, 233, 234, 235, 236, 237, 238, 239, 240, and 241.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Farrar Dyke. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Al-Khatib. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Say yay, yay.
Yay.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
The vote is 6 yay, 0 nay. Therefore, the motion to adopt the investigation reports from W0232 through W0241 passes.
Thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. We will now move on to resolutions and other actions. Today, we are considering our annual revision of the program standard. This is the governing document that sets out requirements and deadlines for Metro Rail and expectations from the WMSC. In accordance with our responsibilities under WMSC Compact, the process set out in our program standard and federal regulations, we update the program standard at least once a year as part of our continuous improvement process. The draft program standard, Metro Rail's comments on the draft, and relevant proposed revisions and associated documentation were provided to each of the commissioners for review ahead of this meeting. The updates before us today include staff recommendations based on our experience as Metro Rail safety regulator and appropriate adjustments based on feedback Metro Rail provided as part of our regular review and comment process. I appreciate this update, that this update reflects our experience as Metro Rail safety regulator and reflects adjustment based on comments from Metro Rail. Dr. Meyer, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, I do. The WMSC Compact lays out our authority and responsibilities, and the program standard helps us put those into practice. As part of our continuous improvement, we consider program standard improvements as we conduct our work throughout the year. The program standard comes to the commissioners for review at least once each calendar year. Mr. Raddick led this revision process and included meetings internally and consultation with Metro Rail personnel. So in accordance with our processes, after the WMSC produced a final draft of the revision, we formally transmitted it to WMATA for review and provided time for Metro Rail to provide feedback. They provided written feedback on the draft in June. We carefully reviewed that feedback in light of our role as the principal safety oversight authority, our compact and relevant regulations, and incorporated changes as appropriate. In some cases, the themes of Metro Rail comments were already been reflected in changes that we had identified during initial revisions. As we have in the past, we recommended providing Metro Rail with several weeks from any action taken today to communicate this update to its personnel. Therefore, we recommend that this revision take effect on September 10th. This effective date is noted in your draft resolution. The changes this year are more limited in scope due to the larger scale improvements we made to the program standard in 2021. And I'll ask Mr. Raddick to cover some of the areas where adjustments are proposed for your consideration today.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. The updates include technical corrections and refinements to the existing program standard, as well as changes to reflect new Metro Rail titles and departmental names. Proposed revisions include updates to the WMSC's process for developing, reviewing, adopting, and revising minimum standards for safety. Updates to reflect that Metro Rail's upcoming agency safety plan revision will include new requirements of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Updates to reflect the ongoing development of the WMSC's risk-based inspection program, prompted in part by the FTA's special directives issued in October 2022, as required by federal law to the WMSC and other SSOAs. This builds on the announced and unannounced inspections that we conduct today. We expect further evolution in this area in future program standard revisions. Changes to some safety event reporting codes and investigation requirements. There's also updates to dispute resolution enforcement policies to include additional steps and opportunities for Metro Rail to communicate its desire to resolve a safety issue in a different way. This includes additional time or alternative options to address the safety issue that Metro Rail may not have previously communicated. Following such effort, Metro Rail continues to have the opportunity to petition for reconsideration to the CEO. Metro Rail may also have the opportunity to petition for reconsideration to the WMSC board. Clarifications for corrective action plan language to further ensure that safety issues are addressed is another change. Additional information to be included with any CAP extension request from Metrorail and a requirement for meetings to be held for CAP modification requests submitted more than 5 days after an actionable item was due. And lastly, adjustments to certain review periods to better address the scope of the review. The WMSC staff conducted a detailed review of each of Metrorail's formal comments on the program standard draft. Some adjustments based on Metrorail comments relate to clarifications of practices such as review of Metrorail hazard analyses. Other adjustments include documentation in the program standard that certain Metrorail real-time alerts contain only preliminary information. As Dr. Meyer mentioned, our current processes have worked well, and we are taking this opportunity to continually improve the program standard so that we can be even more effective. Thank you.
Thank you for that report out. Are there any questions or any discussion from any of the commissioners? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion?
I see Commissioner Rush raising his hand.
Sorry, I don't see it. Okay, Commissioner Rush, please.
Dr. Meyer, I understand this is the context in which WMATA has suggested a mediation process between WMATA and the commission if there's a dispute should arise. And I just think it's good for the record to, at least state what certainly I think my reaction is to that suggestion. I think the commission's reaction as well. A mediation process between the commission and WMATA would be inappropriate. We are in the context of a regulator of WMATA. No one certainly would be suggesting, for example, that the Federal Transit Administration engage in a mediation process should there be a disagreement between the Federal Transit Administration and a transit operation throughout the United States, or that the Federal Railroad Administration engage in a mediation process should there be a dispute between FRA and a freight railroad or a commuter passenger railroad. I think, we do a really good job of trying to keep the lines of communication open with WMATA. I think there's a commitment by both the commissioners and the commission staff to do so. I think we actually have a very good relationship with WMATA, and we do have an exchange of views, just as with respect to the program standard, we've had a back and forth. But a mediation process just would be inappropriate. I just thought it was important to put that on the record.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Rush. I think it's appropriate that you put that on the record, and I would add to that this process has added an additional means of appeal for WMATA if necessary. So we are responsive to the need to maintain good communications and the need to understand each other, because the more we work together as collaboratively, the more it's a win-win for all of us. Are there any other questions from any other commissioners? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt resolution R 2023-04, adopting the annual program standard revision effective September 10th, 2023?
Sure. Could I just toss in one very brief comment, not about mediation, but just about the effectiveness date of the program standard? Some may have questions about our proposal to have it effective on a Sunday, although we're not hard over that it has to start on a Sunday. The reason we picked that is because most WMATA schedules go into effect on Sundays, schedules for employees. So we just simply thought that would be a natural day to bring this into effect. I just wanted to mention that so that people didn't think it was an error.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Meyer, for that clarification. I appreciate that. Is there a motion to adopt resolution R 2023-04?
So moved.
Commissioner Lobby moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Bob, for the motion and the second. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Chair, the vote is 6 yea, 0 nay. So the motion to adopt resolution R 2023-4 passes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. And based on that action, we have one further item, which is the resolution to adopt bylaw changes to align with the revised program standard as we just discussed. For that reason, these bylaw changes reflecting the revision to section 11 of the program standard would also be effective on September 10th, 2023, along with the program standard. These proposed changes have also been distributed for commissioner review. Is there any discussion? Can I get a motion to adopt resolution R 2023-05, adopting the revised bylaws?
So moved.
Move Mr. Bob, second.
Second,
Second, Commissioner, I didn't see who that was.
Al Khatib.
Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
So Chair, again, the vote is 6 yea, 0 nay. The motion to adopt resolution R 2023-5 passes, adopting the revision to the bylaws.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. We will now move on to items that don't require a vote, if I have this understanding, if I'm understanding this correctly, and that's audits with an update from Deputy Chief Operating Officer Davis Raddick. Mr. Raddick?
Thank you, Chair Hart. On July 25th, we issued our audit of Metro Rail Structures program. The WMSC performed this audit through in-depth reviews, site visits, and documented data reviews conducted in 2022 and 2023. The scope of this audit includes the assessment of structures, inspection, maintenance, and engineering practices and procedures and associated training for purposes of compliance with applicable plans, policies, regulations, and industry best practices. We appreciate the cooperation of Metro Rail personnel during this audit. The audit demonstrates that Metro Rail has maintained the safety improvements developed and implemented through the corrective action plans Metro Rail created to address the findings of the WMSC's Elevated Structures Audit Report issued in 2021. In some cases, this audit could not fully assess whether these have resulted in sustained long-term change because the corrective action plans were closed in the months just prior to this audit or have not yet concluded. However, this audit is a positive example of the continuous safety improvement that is possible through the WMSC's triennial audit process. This audit did identify some areas where Metro Rail is not following its policies and procedures related to its structures programs. As a result, the WMSC issued 2 findings requiring Metro Rail to develop corrective action plans. First, Metro Rail is not carrying out the safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion for the structures program required by Metro Rail's agency safety plan to ensure safe and effective structural engineering, maintenance, and operation. This includes Metro Rail not documenting, tracking, and managing hazards related to the structures department. Second, Metro Rail has not formalized and documented its on-the-job training process for structural inspection. There is no formalized documented process to ensure that on-the-job training occurs for all personnel or that the same information is covered for all personnel. Metro Rail's proposed corrective action plans to address these findings are due later this month. We are developing draft reports for our audits of Metro Rail's roadway maintenance machine program and of Metro Rail's automatic train control and signals audit. We concluded interviews and field observations in June and July for our audit of Metro Rail's power systems. This includes both high and low voltage power and related equipment. As always, we communicate these issues that we identified during field observations to Metro Rail personnel. An exit conference is scheduled later this month. Our audits assess Metro Rail against the relevant criteria such as the requirements of Metro Rail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, requirements specified in other Metro Rail documents such as SOPs, manuals, and orders, and regulatory requirements. These audits cover all aspects of Metro Rail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan over a 3-year period and are designed to proactively identify safety issues. We take steps to ensure Metro Rail personnel feel free to speak openly and transparently with us during each interaction, as this leads to the greatest opportunity for accurate and meaningful recognition of positive practices or areas for improvement. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Raddick. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Raddick? Okay, hearing none, we will now take up the next agenda item, which is corrective action plans with an update from Ms. Ashley Rhodes. Ms. Rhodes?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Since the last public meeting, we have closed 7 caps. When Metro Rail developed corrective action plans to address the safety deficiencies identified by WMSC findings and recommendations, or other issues specified by the WMSC program standard, Metro Rail submits these plans to the WMSC for review and approval. After Metro Rail submits acceptable cap proposals that will address the safety deficiency, Metro Rail is responsible for implementing its corrective action plans on the schedule documented in the CAP. Metro Rail's implementation of each of these CAPs improves the safety of the system for riders and workers. Even after a CAP is closed, the WMSC monitors Metro Rail's actions on an ongoing basis through our audit, inspection, and other oversight activities. Overall, Metro Rail currently has 102 open CAPs that it is in the process of implementing. During that implementation, the WMSC reviews information to verify progress. Metro Rail's implementation of each of these CAPs improves the safety of the system for riders and workers. As I mentioned, the WMSC has closed 7 CAPs since the last public meeting. To implement CAP C0026, Metro Rail identified all culverts it is responsible for maintaining and incorporated each as a specific asset in Maximo, Metro Rail's maintenance management system. This ensures that inspections are scheduled as required by Metro Rail's procedures, including more frequent inspections for those culverts showing signs of deterioration. This addresses finding 5 of the track audit that we issued in 2020, that Metro Rail was not conducting these inspections as required by its track and structures maintenance manual. To implement CAP C0149, Metro Rail implemented new software on its older rail cars to provide a layer of protection against improper train movement without speed commands. The update adds the requirement that train operators take action and enter a code in order to move the train when there are 0 speed commands. Previously, this safety feature had only been in place on newer rail cars. To implement CAP C0179, addressing a recommendation from the Emergency Management and Fire and Life Safety Audit, Metro Rail conducted workload assessments for several departments to determine how to align Metro Rail's fire and life safety and emergency management personnel and their responsibilities. To implement CAP C0188, Metro Rail developed student proficiency requirements for rail training classes and trained instructors on how to assess students based on these requirements. This addresses a finding in the rail operations audit issued last year that Metro Rail does not have documented criteria to determine student proficiency in practical demonstrations of safety critical operational tasks. To implement CAP C0198, Metro Rail developed a new certification manual and requirements for rail quality assurance quality control personnel for their certification related to train operation. This addresses a recommendation from the rail operations audit that Metro Rail could improve the integrity of its certification process by providing for QA/QC personnel to be certified by an entity other than their own colleagues. To implement CAP C0196, Metro Rail assessed opportunities to improve training by assigning dedicated instructors to each division. Metro Rail determined that it would not implement this change. This addressed a recommendation from the rail operations audit. To implement CAP C0203, Metro Rail revised its work alone policy for elevator and escalator personnel. The WMSC's station maintenance, elevator, and escalator audit had identified that Metro Rail did not define what entry-level personnel, known as helpers, were or were not authorized to do, and any restrictions to ensure that work is safely done. The revised procedure applies to helpers, and it provides activities that can only be done when working with colleagues. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Rhodes? Okay, hearing none, we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is an update on some of the WMSC's latest activities overseeing Metro Rail safety certification process from Mr. Tino Sahu. Mr. Sahu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Metro Rail's safety certification process is a critical element of Metro Rail's safety management system. Taking a comprehensive approach to identifying and understanding all failure modes or hazards and proactively mitigating the likelihood and severity of those hazards in a systematic way as documented in Metrorail's policy and procedures is what provides for the overall safety of the Metrorail system. We oversee Metrorail safety certification through field observations, document and data review, and regular meetings with Metrorail, as well as by observing the discussions among Metrorail safety certification committees and working groups. It is in all cases Metrorail's responsibility to carry out this work in accordance with its policies and procedures. We continue to oversee Metrorail's work to complete outstanding items on Silver Line Phase 2 and Potomac Yard Station. We also continue to monitor Metrorail safety certification working group for the new 8000 series rail cars expected to go into service in coming years. We have been overseeing Metrorail's work related to automatic train operation and automatic door operation for several years. We have identified and continuously communicated significant issues to Metrorail. Last August, we designated this project for an in-depth review, meaning that it requires our concurrence that Metrorail has completed its safety certification process, including any mitigations or corrective actions prior to operating in passenger service or for any use other than testing. We have conducted and observed weekly meetings, observed Metrorail field activities, including overnight train runs outside of passenger service hours, and have been in continuous contact with Metrorail's project team and other personnel. Metrorail's conduct of the project has lacked the rigor that matches industry practice for systems engineering, and the path of work was not likely to lead to Metrorail's safety certification. Therefore, it was not on track to receive WMSC concurrence. The WMSC has continued our proactive communication on this topic. This has recently led to Metrorail changing course with the intent of meeting its safety certification requirements for automatic door operation and for automatic train operation. Metrorail is taking what we hope will be positive steps of developing engineering and system requirements, and then developing test plans that would lead to a consistent, meaningful approach to conducting tests and analyzing results in accordance with safety requirements. I'll turn it over to our Train Control and Signals Program Manager, Paul Smith, for additional updates.
Thank you, Mr. Sehu. As you mentioned, we have continued to proactively reinforce the need for Metrorail to comply with its safety certification and hazard management procedures and associated processes. It is Metrorail's responsibility to carry out this holistic approach in accordance with its procedures. As Metrorail identifies, assesses the cause of, and determines mitigations for technical issues, we are continuing our interactions with Metrorail's project team, executive leadership, and others. The focus is on Metrorail's identification and mitigation of organizational and operational hazards as required by Metrorail's safety certification program and other Metrorail safety commitments. Metrorail's commitments are included in, among other things, its agency safety plan, safety certification program plan, project-specific safety certification plan, and other processes and procedures. This is a significant effort that requires Metrorail to ensure its entire organization is ready for such a change. Thus far, we have observed system behavior during Metrorail's field activities that could result in a catastrophe if not systemically identified and addressed. This includes instances such as trains receiving commands to operate above the intended speed and trains continuing through stations at full speed. We have also observed deficiencies related to automatic door operations, such as the current inability to carry out the daily safety tests on older rail cars. These are tests Metrorail requires for safety prior to placing cars into service. We are monitoring Metrorail's work on the rail cars, the wayside systems, the interactions between the two, and the accuracy and completeness of associated information that is available to and monitored by Metrorail personnel. We are also monitoring Metrorail's evolving plans regarding the interaction of automation with the roadway worker protection. We are reviewing new information Metrorail recently provided, as Dr. Mayer mentioned. In addition to our regular meetings and other oversight activities, Metrorail has scheduled a workshop next month. We look forward to Metrorail starting its safety certification projects from a concept of operations and then designing appropriate testing protocols. When the testing adheres to these protocols, the projects will be ready to advance through the steps of safety certification and ultimately receive WMSC concurrence. We are reviewing new documents as Metrorail provides them. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Smith and Mr. Sahu. That completes our meeting for today. As a reminder, you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels, or by email. We expect to hold our next public meeting on September 19th, 2023. We appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Hearing no further business, this meeting is hereby adjourned.